This is Geek Gab with your host, Dornall, and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Monday, March 3rd, 2025. I got all of those right. It's Monday, it's March, it's the 3rd, and it's 2025.
It's a Christmas miracle.
And it's not Christmas.
Oh, I got that one wrong, I guess.
So I got a couple things I wanted to talk about today, so I wanted to speed through a couple of these so we could get to our guest. Had an appointment, half an hour outside of town because everything except the grocery store is half an hour outside of town. And so while I was half an hour outside of town, I thought I'd go to the Chick-fil-A that I always go to and get some Chick-fil-A because, I'm half an hour outside of town and that's the only time I can go there. So I said to my phone, phone, take me to Chick-fil-A. And it started taking me a really weird route. And it took me about 3/4 of the way through the route before I realized I had no idea where I was going.
Oh, an adventure.
And I thought, well, apparently I'm blindly following the orders of the phone, but it said this was the closest one. This was like 8 minutes away, and all the others were like 20 or 30 minutes away. So I thought, well, this has to be the right one because I always go to the closest one. And I actually just figured out right here live on the show what happened, why this happened. And then it drove me. And this is when I begin to feel really kind of shaky about the whole situation. The closest one to me is one of those standalone units where you can go through the drive-through. I was expecting to go through the drive-through and get some food and go home and eat. But it drove me right into the parking lot of a mall, which was really weird because I don't often go to malls. And I didn't know that there were any Chick-fil-A's in malls in this part of Utah. Then I figured out it was taking me to a food court in which there was, in point of fact, a Chick-fil-A. So I thought, okay, fine. I'll go walk into this food court and get some Chick-fil-A, which I did. And then I realized, well, I'm here at the mall and I'm getting Chick-fil-A, I might as well see if there are any movies, because one of the things I drove past on my way to the mall, and I had this sinking feeling because I was following the directions and I could see it was taking me to the mall, and I'm like, why the hell am I going to the mall? But I was still just blindly following the instructions of the phone. Like a drone, because that's what we've all been reduced to. Drones following the orders of electronic gadgets. So I started flipping through the website of this theater because I've got the home pages of all the theaters within like 100 miles on my phone. And the ones I don't have the home pages for, I've got the apps for. Because, while I'm out and about, every theater is at least, would you like to guess at least how far away?
About half an hour.
At least half an hour away. Yep. So if I'm out and about and there's a good show playing, I like to go see a show so I can review it for this show, right? So I pick it up and I'm like, I know there's nothing good playing. So if there's anything good playing, I would have known about it and wanted to go see it. And for the most part, I was right. There was a bunch of crap playing. But there was actually one good movie that I actually wanted to see. I was excited about seeing, so I went and saw that. It has nothing to do with the theme of today's show, but I want to review it real quick at the top of the show. But I figured out what happened just right now on the show as I was relating this story. There was a whole crap load of construction going on the road between my doctor's office and the mall. And that made what would be an 8-minute drive into like a 30-minute drive. So every route to get to this mall was all blocked off. And of course, I went to the shorter 25-minute Chick-fil-A drive. Only now that construction is over, it's only 8 minutes. So everything's changed abruptly. My world has been altered without me realizing. So the movie is called Last Breath. And it's got Woody Harrelson in it and a bunch of other people whose names I don't know, but except the one guy I should recognize who played Aquaman's dad in the Aquaman movies. And he's been in a whole bunch of other stuff too that you would recognize him.
It's a that guy actor.
Yes.
He shows up in a bunch of movies and you point at the screen and go, oh, that guy.
Yes. He was in another movie that was a great movie, that was an action movie, that was maybe science fiction or something, only he had a big Maori tattoo on his face. He was in the first season of Fear the Walking Dead, the one that started off right at the beginning with the family and the zombie apocalypse. And he's like Australian or like genuinely Maori or something. So
was he on the see the new Boba Fett actor?
No, I don't think so. No.
What, do all Boba Fett actors look the same to you, Simon Hogwood? Gosh, thanks for listening.
But he played the captain of the ship, so he's the only guy really on it you would notice, unless you remember Doomsday from 2006, which I do. Do you remember Doomsday from 2006?
I do not.
It's sort of the Mad Max meets zombie movie meets Knights of the Round Table.
Whatever, man. You're just making stuff up at this point.
At one point, they have a really gorgeous blonde lady who's the daughter of Malcolm McDowell. And she gets into the car with them while they have the Mad Max sequence on the road. And she was a beautiful, gorgeous 20-something actress 19 years ago. And she's now a 19-year-old, more mature actress who had a bit part in this movie. Those are the only three people in the crew I recognize at all. So anyways, Last Breath is about a ship whose job it is to repair petroleum pipelines in the North Sea so they will deliver oil to Scotland so that homes in Scotland and England will have heating oil for the winter. Otherwise, people starve and die. Woody Harrelson and two other actors. And there's another that guy actor. He's been in a few bit parts. He is some variety of Asian, by which I mean, for those of you who are from the British Isles, East Asian, not Middle Eastern. Some variety of Asian actor, and I cannot remember anything else I've been in, but I absolutely recognize him. He and another diver go down. The ship they're on has an automatic system to keep them adjusted in the high 20 to 40 foot swells of the North Sea storms. Unfortunately, the computer system in control of all of this automatic thrusters, which keep the ship stable, and this is based on a true story. There was an incident which happened. They made a documentary about it. They took the documentary, fictionalized it to a certain extent, and then made this movie based on it. And the documentary was also called Last Breath. and everything shuts down on the ship. Like everything computerized shuts off that's controlling its position. And so they have to descend 300 feet below the ocean, which requires, spending like 12 hours in these pressurization chambers to get pressurized. And then they have to depressurize for 4 hours upon coming up. So they descend in a diving bell. They leap out the diving bell, the two divers, with Woody Harrelson left in the bell because he's the one who checks their suit and everything as they're leaving and makes sure that their umbilicals are playing out. Oh, maybe I've got the wrong person. My apologies. Well, he was definitely in Fear the Walking Dead. Apparently, I'm the racist. My bad.
Do all swarthy character actors just look the same to you?
Only if they're Maori.
Only if they're Maori.
So anyways, the ship gets pushed off station because of the storm when all the thrusters shut down. The movie starts out with this young guy. He's been on 5 rotations before on the bottom of the ocean, and he's got a fiance, and they're beautiful and they're cute and they're very much in love. And he's a good kid. He's only been on 5 rotations. Each rotation is about 28 days, 4 weeks. And they're down there in the dark just repairing stuff and then checking on things, seeing if anything is, hinky. So it's not necessarily an emergency. This is just regular maintenance. They're just a crew on regular maintenance, trawling back and forth on wellheads where they're digging the stuff up from the bottom of the North Sea. And it's not deep stuff. It's not like that deep well in the Gulf of Mexico. They're only 300 feet down, but still 300 feet down is enough. So the water is absolutely, utterly black.
Warpig correction. Gulf of America.
Not when that disaster happened. And the disaster I'm talking about, the Deep Horizon disaster?
Was that the BP oil spill?
BP oil spill, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's a routine job, but it's a very, very dangerous job. It's deadly. And in the beginning, with these 2 lovely kids, they're both in their early 20s, and he's like, and I just want to let you know that it's not any more dangerous than, it's less dangerous than going into space. And she says, well, what is cute about that? What is funny about that is you think that's reassuring. It's one of the most dangerous jobs on the face of the planet because you need oxygen piped in all the time. It is 2 degrees above freezing, so you need warm water piped into your suit all the time to avoid from being frozen. And the bell descends to 300 feet and stops, and then you jump out of the bell down to the bottom of the ocean. So you're not even in this bell. And then when the ship gets hit by swells, if it drops 20 feet, the bell drops 20 feet and then jumps up 20 feet when the ship goes up. That's why the bell can't be on the floor of the ocean, is because it would be jumping up and down constantly. And it would just be incredibly unsafe, and then swinging back and forth as the ship moved at least a little bit. So, big disaster. The kid's umbilical cord gets wrapped around just this piece of metal on the stanchion on the side of this wellhead, and the ship is being driven away by the power of the storm, and his umbilical is the only thing keeping the ship from being driven away. He is literally the anchor holding this massive vessel in place. The umbilical is a series of hollow rubber tubes. Obviously, this is not a tenable situation. So the other diver, the East Asian I was speaking of, says, look, turn on your backup, because he can't breathe because he's not getting oxygen through his umbilical because it's all pinched off. Turn on your backup. So he turns on his backup oxygen, says, how much time do I have? He says, 10 minutes. Now, you need to pay attention. The next thing that's going to happen is your umbilical is going to snap. And I need you to get back on top of this thing so I can find you. And then his umbilical snaps, and the other diver is dragged away because all of a sudden the ship, which can't control anything, it can't move anywhere under its own power, gets dragged away. The diving bell gets dragged away. The other diver gets dragged away. He falls onto the ocean floor, and he is utterly alone and no idea where this, this container for a bunch of like 6 different wellheads is. And, he pops this flare like a road flare, and he can't see anything beyond a couple of feet because it is so pitch black on this freezing cold floor of the ocean. So back up in the ship, they have to figure out a way to fix the thrusters, get back on station, get everything together against the force of this North Sea storm that's blowing in order to try and get down to this kid and rescue him as 10 minutes of oxygen are slowly running out. So I'm not going to give away any more of the movie. That's just the beginning of the movie. That's the, setup of the movie. It was great. It was well acted. It was tense. It was obviously not made on a massive budget. That's why it didn't have a ton of A-list actors, but I thoroughly enjoy it, and I would definitely give it a recommend to anybody who wants to go, who it sounds like something they want to go see. I did not feel like I wasted my time seeing it in the theaters, wasted my money, I mean.
Cool. Sounds like one of those Lost in Space or storm disaster movies at the bottom of the ocean.
They didn't try to oversell it, though. I mean, a lot of those disaster movies, sometimes it's not a disaster movie in the mold of like the Poseidon Adventure or the Towering Inferno or something like that. They're not trying to push it. They're not trying to oversell it. They really are trying to make this a dramatized documentary, just trying to tell the story of what actually happened. So it's more about the drama of the men and the drama of being on this ship and the drama of being on the in this hostile environment and trying to save this crewman, and less about, bang, boom, crash, burn, and things like that.
Got it.
Which, by the way, you guys know I'm a action movie addict, but this is not a. This is one of the dramatic movies I enjoy and I appreciate. I love the Poseidon Adventure, and I did a review of the airplane movies, and I love the airplane movies. This is a drama. It's still a good movie.
Cool.
So, Blood Drive, which I kind of partially reviewed last week, which is in line with our topic this week. It is Carnage Monday. And I gave it kind of a review last week. I will say this. This show bills itself as a grindhouse death race TV show. They only made 13 episodes. And it is, I want to explain this by describing it in terms of a role-playing game. If you made a serious dramatic movie like Saving Private Ryan or something, where the main characters of the movie behaved in the same way that player characters in a role-playing game behaved, it would simultaneously be the stupidest comedy ever and the most grotesque and stomach-churning war crimes you could imagine. Am I lying?
Sign me up. That's exactly what we play for.
Okay, so you've got to realize, but at the playing table, it's not that serious. You just don't take it that seriously because you're just playing a role-playing game, right? It's not, it's, you just don't take it that seriously because you can't take it that seriously, right? You're not sitting there, vomiting at the table. Just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay. This show, Blood Drop, is billed as a grindhouse movie. And there are so many appalling things going on in this show. Every episode is focused around a brand new grindhouse theme. There's the cannibal show. There's the sort of zombie show. There's the chopsaki show. But it's not played. It's put together in such a way that you just can't take it that seriously. It's not meant to be taken that seriously. This is not like the original, Last House on the Left, or the original The Hills Have Eyes, or something like Hostel, or the original Saw, okay? This is not torture porn. It's got kind of horrifying things going on, almost more horrifying than Saw in a way, but it's black humor. It's dark humor, right? It's humorous at the same time it's being gory. So the gore isn't played for making you morally appalled. The gore is kind of played for people who can appreciate that level of dark humor. And other elements of the show are played for people who have a little bit bent sense of humor. And I think maybe that applies to like a lot of veterans have the kind of sense of humor or sensibility that might hang with this show. And I had the sense of humor that was okay with this show. So, yes, there are absolutely appalling things going on with this show, but you just can't take them that seriously because they're not meant that seriously. They're not meant to horrify you. They're not played to horrify you. And the humor, I'm not saying it's not jokes. It's not laugh-a-minute jokes. It's not stand-up jokes. But the kind of humor it's going for, the kind of grim, sort of dark humor, really lands for me. There are people for whom it would not land for. People who have very straight humor. Like, I have a very nice sister. She's a sweetheart. I love her dearly. She absolutely could not handle this show. It would make her cry. I love her to death. She should not watch this show. She's just too sweet.
Got it.
I'm a little bit. I just it was fine. I was happy. I enjoyed the show. And I'm not afraid to admit it. So, having said that, if you have a little bit bent sense of humor, it's a fun show. If you can hang with the show where, you know, the engines of the cars, it's called Blood Drive because they're in a death race, kind of like Death Race 2000. And in order to get blood that goes into the engines, they take people and they push them into the engines, which have these big grindy motor bits that grind up the body.
That's awesome.
And the blood goes into this reservoir, and then the car gets energy from the blood. Believe it or not, last time we made a big deal how that doesn't fit with the laws of physics. They actually explain that it's okay. That they explain that later on in the show. That actually gets explained. So I'm okay with it. It's a fun time. I found it a fun time. Not for everyone. Definitely not for everyone. 2 of the drivers are literal serial killers. And their conversations, they're married to each other. And the spark, the joy went out of their marriage before they went on the road. And the reason why they went on Blood Drive was so they could reignite that spark of love. And see, the problem is she had been cheating on him. Not by sleeping with somebody. She had been cheating on him because they were serial killers, and she promised when they got married that they would never go out and kill somebody without the other person there.
Oh boy.
So they're on Blood Drive to try and reignite the old flame, to get together and to kill people together again, to try and bring back the joy they first had on their honeymoon when they got together and killed the bellhop in the hotel.
That's so absurd.
So if you're okay with that level of, humor,
Have we got the film for you?
apparently I was okay with that level of humor because it made me laugh. It made me smile. It kept me entertained. And not in a way where like I was watching it while I played a video game. I actually sat there and watched the show. And you have to sit there and watch the show because there's so many sight gags and the screen is so busy. And the way they did the colors and everything. I just enjoyed the show. So, yeah. If you want to psychoanalyze me based on that, that's okay. I don't even care. So, Blood Drive. I liked it. Qualified recommendation for people who can handle that level of that kind of humor.
You know who you are, you sick puppies.
Sick people. But now we've gotten all that out of the way. It's time to introduce our guest, Jay Barnson, who I have met in person 3 times, I think, at FanX. And we had met each other on Facebook or Twitter several years ago, 2015, I think, or sometime around there.
Yeah, it was a mutual friend, kind of a little get together. I think it was the first time.
Oh, yes. Okay. It would have been
Yeah.
2015.
Yeah.
Way back in the dark ages. This is great. Hey, welcome to the show, by the way.
Is this the first time we had you on the show?
Yes, this is the first time I've been on the show.
Oh, well. I'm sorry it's taken so long.
I just, consider it was a very, very long, intro there.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? DW is an awesome guy in person. We do the show because we met in person long time ago, and I believe you waited until the second or third episode to have me on as co-host. So um, don't sweat it.
Well, I'm glad to be here now.
Um,
So go.
Oh,
wanna
I
know.
was actually going to ask you, Warpig. You had a great setup for that, for the theme, for the Car Wars, and you just let it drop.
No.
I,
I thought. See, this is usually the part of the show with the guests where you take over. So I was letting you rock it however you wanted to take it. But Jay is on the show, and it was just a coincidence that I started watching Blood Drive before Jay got on the show, and I heard later that he was doing. Just released on the 21st of February a novel number 5, I believe, in the Car Wars series of novels for Steve Jackson Games. And I was like, I was going to have Jay on the show anyway. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm watching Blood Drive. That would be great. And then Jay mentioned today, while we were discussing things in DMs, that he also worked on the Twisted Metal video game.
yeah, we
I
touched on that
was
in the
like,
green room. I'd love to hear more about that.
I was like, it's perfect. It's a perfect topic. Car Carnage Monday.
Is it a match made in heaven? Nobody has shows like us. We are the best.
Actually, well, I was going to say that was actually kind of the reason I got the gig. Was because I had several novels out, and I had worked on Twisted Metal way back in the day, and so I was introduced to the publisher, Hillbilly, over at Three Ravens Publishing. I was introduced to him as, hey, you need to talk to this guy, and because he's not only writes good stuff, but he worked on Twisted Metal, so he knows about cars and guns and car carnage, and so yeah, was invited to send in a synopsis, and I got through the approval process, got the stamp of approval from the man himself, Steve Jackson, and went forward on this, and it's been a fun ride.
Well, I don't know where to begin. It sounds like you've touched on a little bit of everything of all of the things that we love on the Geek Gab.
Oh, okay then. Well, hey, video games, geeky board games, Steve Jackson, novels, science fiction, and car carnage. Take your pick.
I didn't realize that this was an actual Car Wars tie-in novel. That's really cool. Where is Jeffro when you need him? It's called Dead to Rights. Can you tell me about that? Let's just get that out of the way before we talk about the video games.
Okay, well, Dead to Rights, yeah, it's a standalone novel. It's the fifth one in the Car Warriors Auto Duel Chronicles, which is um, the series that Three Ravens is doing in conjunction with Steve Jackson Games. Anyway, and but it's a standalone novel, so it doesn't really have anything to do other than we kind of borrow the backgrounds. We shared the information of what's going on around this time frame, but mine is not tied into any of the arcs, and it actually takes place a little bit before. I think when we were talking the timelines, a little bit before um, was it uh, the current arc, so book one. So I'm kind of like book zero in that respect. But anyway, yeah. So this one, it's a story of a a girl from a extremely wealthy family on the one end, and a down on his luck, auto duelist. If you're not familiar with Car Wars, I guess I should start with that. The world of Car Wars, Steve Jackson Games, is kind of a little bit of Mad Max meets a little bit of Cyberpunk meets a little bit of all this so reality TV. It's a little and a little bit of the post-apocalyptic, but it's not really the whole world's gone to well, maybe it has, uh, but where gladiatorial contest between heavily armed vehicles is like the most popular reality show, the most popular sport out there. And of course, they've got everything. They've got drones out there in between the cities, where they can also record live combat between bandits and whatnot. And so anyway, it's science fiction, dark future, a little tongue in cheek, but probably not as absurd as Twisted Metal gets or anything like that. But anyway, and my story again is dealing actually a little bit with the extremely ultra wealthy of the world, the big corporations, and the one of the main characters is a daughter of very wealthy, kind of arms dealer, or arms producer. And then the guy, Sidewinder, he was once the rising star of the auto dueling circuit, now down on his luck and is running out of money, cars, and ideas. And when a disaster strikes her family, she needs someone that she knows is not connected anywhere, and he's pretty much at the last rung of his career in life. And so she gets together with him, and they have to solve the mystery and get revenge and uh, and save her family. And anyway, so that's the premise. One of the big things that I deal with, it's really kind of fun. Um, Car Wars it started out, I got like the first edition of the game. It's, I got the little plastic boxes that came out with in the early 80s. And, with the little cutout cardboard, pieces that, was for, and now it's a much bigger game. And there's a new edition that came out just a couple of years ago. I've got that one too. And it's got, miniature. Unfortunately, mine aren't painted. It's kind of like, was it, the gray. So all my cars are gray, but it's got miniatures about the
No
size
judgment here. Yeah.
yeah. It's my fleet of shame. Anyway, but the but they're about the size of Matchbox cars. So then they've made it a lot more user friendly and a lot more visual, and actually it's really cool. But anyway, way back when, and it was really kind of done as a one-off, and they added rules for role playing, and so you could kind of take your character through his career. And one of the issues with it is because it is, you got cars where they're shooting miniguns and rocket launchers at each other. It has a very high mortality rate, and so I suspect the reason that this got in there was just to kind of make the career mode, the kind of the semi role playing game part. And I should call it a full role playing game. I dated a girl who loved the Car Wars RPG. That was her thing. She thought D&D was silly. Yes, we were all snobbish about our role playing games even back then. But she loved Car Wars. And but anyway, it had kind of a role playing career thing, and I think they added rules for. I think it was really just put in just to give characters a lasting chance, where you have the whole clone technology. And it's like you could have a clone stored for you, and you could update, you could record your memories, your mind, and or they could actually download it directly if you didn't take too much brain damage at the point of when you were killed. And they could download your brain into this clone, and then your clone can pick it up, just a few weeks later and continue the career. And so you have this little virtual immortality. And anyway, I thought that was a very interesting thing to play with. And I don't remember if it was, I think it was in a discussion we had, was we were kind of planning out the series, and we had Steve Jackson was there, and or was kind of reading or talking about the comments and stuff like that. And it was the thing, it's like, well, given this, it really changes the culture of the world now, where the rich can afford these clones and this basically kind of a virtual immortality, um, and whereas the rank and file cannot. And that's one of the things, if you're a very successful auto duelist, you could you have a lot of money, and you've got some permanence. Now, whether that is really you who is um, the clone, or you are actually a different person who has the body and the memories of someone who has died, that's a metaphysical question, which I touch on. Actually, a lot of these things, touch on the culture, the legality. This goes on. It also means that, yeah, the rich people are effectively immortal. They mentioned that assassinations are, that's just more of a political statement, because they're going to be back in a week anyway. Um, and
Well, that's really interesting. Like that's like an interesting metaphysical thing to think of, because I mean, depending on how you think about that, it could be a completely different person.
Yeah, and it really, it's like, how does that affect? It's a fairly recent technology. I think the story takes place like 2070 or something like that, so not too far in the future. Um, a couple generations. And so this is something where they're kind of like the first generation of people who could conceivably live forever. And I just kind of hit on that, and I was like, okay, someone from this ultra rich family, what else is there? What does that mean to, can you actually inherit the company when or the legacy, if the head of the family is basically going to be reset every 20-40 years. um and what does that mean? And anyway, this sort of book, this is Car Wars, this is auto dueling. It's pulp fiction. I mean, and that's my forte. That's what I write. I love it. So it's not like, huge, thinky, ponderous, navel gazing or anything like that. But I did want to, bring all this up, and it is a consideration as part of the book. And so that's where the dead to rights, comes from. It's, dealing with actually, a little bit of the legalities there too. But that's really just kind of the MacGuffin that, is a great excuse for doing, Mario Kart with big serious guns and everything. And so that was a lot of fun to write.
Oh, that sounds great. And I love that. I love the two things that you said, um, right there at the end, that you write Pulp Fiction, of course. That is the wheelhouse of Geek Gab, and also that you do it's you've created a story as it should, right? You have a really interesting world that with things in the setting that are really important and interesting, and they inform what happens in the story. But you're telling a story about cars that drive around and shoot other cars, right? Like that's the meat. Like John Wick is interesting as an action movie, um, because it creates this sort of cool. You see glimpses of this shadow world of criminals and assassins, right? And then, but that's not the point of the movie. And every part of the movie that dwells too much on that shadow world kind of seems hollow and plastic, because you're just there to see Keanu Reeves shoot people in the face.
The gun fu.
Yeah, and so when you see this cover, it's cool that you've brought those sort of interesting ideas into it, but it's really important that you're delivering on the promise of the cover, which is this guy's got miniguns strapped to the hood of his car, and someone's chasing him in an aircraft. Like this is serious business.
Well, if you look in the background, there's at least one other car back there, and the explosions and everything. So this is a wild battle taking place.
I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So, all right, where do you get? Well, anyway, I'm going to put a link to this if I haven't already. For if you guys hang out on YouTube, I'm showing the page on your website here, jbarnson.com. I'm going to make sure there's a link to your book in the show notes if they're not already there. Yeah, Bradford Walker is in the chat. Hey, thanks for hanging out. He says the same thing that I did, right? The core appeal of Car Wars: dudes in cars with guns shooting each other. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Heck yeah.
That's why I played it. I mean, that's the thing, and being able to capture that flavor, what was in our imagination as we were, performing the turns and doing the calculations with our car, with our little cardboard stuff. But what was in our minds was this.
Yes. That's awesome. I'm so glad that that's a great cover, by the way. And that reminds me of nope, lost it. Completely lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, it's my fault.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so obviously you've got all sorts of crazy influences. You say that you love to write, but you also do code. You've done video games and everything like that. So we're gonna have the link to this book. Let's talk about all this other stuff. Like where did this come from? You got into. You said that you got into the Car Wars. So now I mixed these two stories together because you got writing for Car Wars because of your work on Twisted Metal, but you were already into Car Wars. Like you already knew what it was.
Yes. I was playing back in the 80s. And so, when I mentioned I had a girlfriend who was really into Car Wars. We were like 16 at the time. And so this is, with the geeky crowd I hung out with back in the 80s. So now you know what an old fart I am.
That's amazing, by the way. Girls into Car Wars.
Oh yeah.
Once again, where's Jeffro when you need him? If you know, you know.
I've read. I'm familiar with him, and I've read his book on the pulp origins of D&D. The appendix. I've forgotten the appendix number.
N. Yeah, he's a
N.
huge Car Wars guy. He
Oh,
loves Steve
okay.
Jackson games. He loves all that stuff.
Oh yeah, well, I enjoyed his Appendix N, and I'm glad. Steve Jackson is amazing. He's very cool, and I don't know if they said don't meet your heroes, and I don't know how much I've actually met him, other than just being in some chats with him and stuff like that. But he's actually seems to be just as cool as I imagined. So
good. I've heard nothing but great things about the guy.
Yeah.
So that must have been an honor and a pleasure to work with him on this.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to go back. What other kinds of stuff do you write? Because I just browsing, and I'm not gonna bore you with your website because you were there. You were there. You wrote it. You've got your bio talks about like having a wild imagination, and I see on the books page there's all sorts of different kind of books. So what else do you write about?
Well, as far as my novels are concerned, I've got 2 series. The first is the Blood Creek saga. Blood Creek Witch is the first one. And that was actually inspired by, a lot of things. I'm also a Utahn, like Daddy Warpig. And we go regularly to the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival, and where they have the the professional storytellers. And my wife is really into like the ghost stories and the traditional creepy stories like that, and the fairies, the old fairy tales, the old fairy stories can be, the fairies were not nice and happy pointed ear Keebler elves or anything like that. They were dark and sometimes horrific, but definitely people you did not mess with lightly. But anyway, there is a whole bunch of stories from North America, and to a degree, well, the first fantasy stories I ever heard were oral folk tales from my father, who I did not realize it at the time. He didn't actually make them up as he went. They were actually very old tales, especially Jack tales. Of which you kind of have to research them now, but the ones most familiar to people is probably Jack and the Beanstalk. But back in that era, there were tons of Jack stories, and Jack was kind of the everyman type. Sometimes fool, sometimes wise in spite of himself. He was kind of the everyman character, and there were hundreds of Jack tales. A bunch of them made their way to the United States, and back in the early days, or even before it was, when it was just the states and the colonies. And anyway, these Jack kind of became Americanized, and he was dealing with witches and giants and the devil, I think, at one point, and killer unicorn in one story. Um, anyway, and so you had that, and that was those were things that I heard when I was like 3 or 4 years old. With Jack. Jack versus the giants, Jack versus the witches. There's one that, Sop Paw, which is if you look that up, you find it. Sometimes it's called Sop Doll, which never made any sense to me, but it was always Sop Paw when I heard it. Anyway, just if good stories, and that probably warped my brain forever. And so you combine that with a love of like Twilight Zone and some just the stories I heard, the research, discovering what kind of incredible monsters we have in North America, from folklore and urban legends. And I wanted to do a story set in that version of, well, really Appalachia. I was born in West Virginia. And so, that's when I heard those stories. And so for me, there was giants and ogres and witches and scary stuff over every hill and down in every holler. And so I wanted to do a story about that. And so that's my series. It's I wrote it for me, but it's really kind of a YA series. It's not horror, but it does have horror elements. And anyway, it's about um, four kids in an unincorporated community previously known as Blood Creek, and there are dark things rising in the mountains around them, and they've got talents to use to stave off the disaster that is coming. The other fantasy series is one that's current and ongoing. The Blood Creek is done. It's four books long. The current one, I'm actually working on book 5, and I've got a novella that recently came out that's kind of in the same world. That's the world of the Vanished, and I'm a big fan of portal fantasies as well. So I have a lot of fantasy stuff, and so yeah, the Queen of Monsters is the first one. And so I had this, it was funny how this one came about, because being a fan of those types of things, I was working on a different project at the time, and I had an idea hit me about kind of a world where, the John Carter-esque, or, C.S. the Lion, the Witch and Wardrobe, all those things all kind of congealed together. And the idea that, well, what if you have a world where the people who have these unexplained disappearances, many of them ended up in this fantasy world, and in the, classic John Carter, or nowadays, the Japanese light novel or
Yeah.
manga tradition, they've got superpowers. And the idea was, well, what if this world is used to these people from Earth arriving with these special powers, and they are both considered a threat and a natural resource, and so they are spawn camped by the natives and immediately captured and enslaved, and put on the front lines and stuff like that. And anyway, I kind of took it from there. And so you got that story, and that giving them the superpowers, which includes the regeneration and longevity, so they live a long time, which is why I'm able to have characters from 100 years ago still be active thing. And that's, you can see I have my novella is called Heart of the Sky, and it's Amelia Earhart versus cannibals and dinosaurs. Um,
Awesome.
and yeah, again, I write pulpy stuff, but anyway, yeah, the Queen of Monsters is the first one, and yeah, what happened was I said, oh, I'm just going to write like the first chapter or the first few pages of this because I woke up and I was like, I need to do something with this, and I started writing, and next thing I know, I was 30,000 words in and having a ball. So that's where this series came from. And it's a lot about this people from Earth trying to win their freedom and create their own kind of place out in one of the most dangerous regions of the world, but they're relatively superpowered, so they can survive it sometimes. And anyway, yeah, and I'm on book 5 now, and having a lot of fun writing it. I'll be writing it right after this is over.
Oh, outstanding.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love that. I think that's one of my favorite sort of subgenres or inspirations for uh, fantasy, especially modern fantasy, is that America is so full of great little creepy stories and monsters and cryptids, what have you, that and then if you mix in those traditional folk tales like the fairies and the giants and everything, like from your dad's Jack stories, then it all sort of comes together. That sounds like a really interesting combo.
Oh, I had a lot of fun writing it, and I did not get through a third of the monsters I did research on. So uh, actually, I just had a short story. I do write a lot of short stories too, not just fantasy. Although that is again kind of I love the clash of the mundane with the fantastic. That's kind of my thing. So I like supernatural horror and urban fantasy and and this the portal fantasy. Isekai. Um, I love writing that stuff, which means Dead to Rights was a little bit of a departure for me, but I've also written space opera and some other several other kinds of stories, horror, um, as short stories. I do have a short story called the Yahoo Cafe, which is actually set in the world of the Blood Creek saga. It's a kind of a prequel story, and if you didn't know it, you wouldn't recognize it, except that you recognize that the name of one of the side characters, kind of the creepy side character, um, is the original name of kind of the main character's mother in the Blood Creek Witch, um, before she changed it when she went into hiding. And that connection is, unless I told you, you might not know, but that was a chance for me to use the Yahoo, which is kind of Bigfoot's more aggressive cousin, in a story. But yeah, one of the first ones I had was a Snallygaster, which is one of my favorite monsters now because it is kind of an American dragon. It was originally called the Schnellgeist by the was it the Dutch or German settlers out in the kind of Cumberland area, and which means rapid spirit. Um, and it became kind of Appalachianized over time, and so the German got translated. It went from Schnellgeist to the Snallygaster, and
That's great.
anyway, and I guess Teddy Roosevelt was going to go hunt it at one point, and then got conflicted at one point. But anyway, yes, it was said to have like the head of an alligator and tentacles and big giant wings, and would make off with livestock and everything. And I'm like, this isn't just like an American dragon. Oh, and it had a roar like a locomotive type, is one of the descriptions. And it was like, okay, this isn't just an American dragon. This is like Lovecraftian dragon. This is amazing. And I'm like, I have to use this.
Yes.
um, and then I had, there's a lot of other stuff I had to use. And in some cases I tried to make the Jack stories sneak their way in and kind of make sense, but I had to include the killer unicorn and all that in there. So it's, again, it's fun. I love doing this.
Oh man, what they say, if you do what you love, it's not really work, is it?
Right.
That's amazing, and I do wanna segue into work a little bit because we talked about Twisted Metal earlier.
Right.
So I want to move away from books unless you have more you want to say. And
I'm good.
yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before the show. So just to fill everybody in, I most of you probably know that I do software engineering as well. Um, but I'm only a few years younger than you, and I saw the state of the video game industry. Um, I actually one of the guys I went to school with went to work at EA, and he was the guy who was the husband of the EA spouse, if you remember that.
Ah, yes, I do.
Yeah,
That's
I
how
I
old
actually
school I
I
am.
went to school with those two. They were actually dating in college. It was adorable. Um, those guys are great. So anyway, so I didn't go into that. So this is sort of personal interest to me. So how did you end up working on Twisted Metal? How did you before doing all this writing and following your passion of storytelling and everything like that? How did you end up beating your head against low level code for years?
Um, well, I I was back in the day where, well, you didn't really need a university degree, but I was going to Brigham Young University, and I have always been a video game fan. I mean, that's really what got me into programming in the first place. I was a denizen of the arcade. I would lurk there and use up my allowance there back in the day.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and and then just watch them, and then I'd go home, and eventually I got a Commodore 64, and I would try to make these video games on the Commodore 64, and and I had to learn machine code just to try to speed things up so they would run at a reasonable speed. um well, 6502 assembly really, but anyway, that was what so I kind of got into it with the idea of becoming, doing video games. But then of course we all get into school and we get, a lot more serious, and it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna, do something else, and program databases and everything, and which I have done. And code is code, so it's actually not that not that
It's not that different, is it?
no, not completely. you know, uh, but I was getting interested in actually a few game companies, and I thought, well, maybe I ought to try this. And back in the day, this is right before EA bought Origin, and I thought, oh man, I'd love to work for Origin or something, work on the next Wing Commander or Ultima or something like that. So now you really know how old I am. And anyway, they got bought out by EA, and then I found out that unbeknownst to me, Salt Lake City was a hotbed of video game development studios at the time, and there were several of them. And I interviewed and actually got offers from two different companies, um, and I went ahead and went with a startup because these guys were really focused on the next generation of things. They were a bunch of engineers from Evans and Sutherland, so which did simulations, big military sims and stuff like that, and big, high end stuff. And they were really excited about this new game console coming out that no one had heard of, and if they heard of it, they assumed it had no chance against the titans that were the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. This thing from Sony called the PlayStation, um, and
Oh yeah. What
anyway,
what a dumb name. Certainly
yeah,
won't go anywhere.
it was gonna die. And so when I told people I was working on games for the upcoming Sony PlayStation, after we were no longer that was no longer NDA'd, and we could admit what we were working on, or at least that we could admit the console that we were working on, and say, oh yes, this is going to be really cool, this is an amazing system. And it's funny, people give me this sympathetic look like, oh, oh, you're working on that. Oh, well, you can find another job, maybe get, working on the, Sega or Nintendo in the future after this goes belly up. But it was destined for failure. Um, anyway, but I went and interviewed there, and they were really focused on the 3D because, of course, that was what the PlayStation, 32-bit and 3D graphics and all this really cool stuff, which was what I was excited about. And so I, kind of showed off some of the stuff that I was working on. Originally, I was brought in. I'd done a bunch of stuff on the PC, and I had demos for the PC, and I had some assembly code stuff to speed up the rasterization, and I had the little 3D tank game I had that was kind of like a networked battle zone type thing that you could play over network with someone, and I'd use that as my final project for a networking class, and stuff like that. Anyway, they offered me like, oh yeah, we'd like you to do PC stuff, but because they were going to do ports of everything to the PC. So I was like, okay, that's cool. But they wanted me to get to work right away, and they were kind of focused on the PlayStation stuff. And so anyway, and the two PlayStation games that they were working on simultaneously, they were for Sony. It was a place called Single Track, and they were doing a game that one of them was called Urban Assault was the code name, and the other one was like Red Mercury, and both of them were exciting to me. Twisted Metal, or well, it became the Urban Assault became Twisted Metal very quickly, and I was excited about that because I was a Car Wars fan. And in fact, once I found out, I'm like, oh, I get to work on this thing. And I was actually working on both games at the same time. They were both the same game at one point. You could actually take the Peregrine from Warhawk. I don't know if you remember that one. It was a kind of a at the time I was thinking it was kind of like the shooter from the 2D arcade games, like R-Type, type of ship done in full 3D. And so, it was giving me the Wing Commander vibes plus the old 2D, side shooters, science fiction stuff. So that was exciting. And of course, Twisted Metal just thrilled me because I liked Car Wars, and I brought in my Car Wars rule books, and I had them in my desk, as in case I needed a little, inspiration. I never actually got to use them, but they were always there. It was Sony's game, and it was definitely not Car Wars. It was their own thing, and so we were developers, and while a lot of what we got to kind of inspire and do. And I got the claim to fame of getting the sprite code working, so that we had the stuff where Sweet Tooth the clown, his face would always kind of float around over top of the ice cream truck, and I was using special sprites for the fires and explosions and stuff. I did a lot of special effects coding, which it was stuff that a lot of these engineers they weren't quite familiar with, like all the ways of faking it. They were always used to doing it, very, we need this, 5,000 polygon explosion. It's like, no, you just use a sprite. Here you go. But I mean,
Right.
I mean, the thing is, these guys, a lot of them were gamers, not all of them, but they were all like super sharp. I was in a team with some absolutely brilliant guys, and which I thought was just one of the coolest things when even the artists were teaching me about 3D graphics and everything, and I was just here I was, this junior guy going, this is amazing. But I was also the one of the most hardcore gamers on the team, so I got to be consulted a lot for how things should run. And I was, pointing out some of the flaws with, some of the initial design work there. It's like, okay, yeah, technically, according to this, this guy is, you could just fire consistently on him for 10 minutes straight before he blows up. That's no fun,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds obvious, but when people are just there throwing numbers around, they're like, "Oh, this sounds right," and then I would do the math. I'm like, "Yeah, this isn't necessarily the best gameplay," but again, it was Sony's design, and we just got to kind of add our expertise to it, our flavor to it, and the effort that we went into it. Sweet Tooth kind of became the clown kind of became the icon for the Twisted Metal stuff, and that was
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
he's
that
the
was
mascot for sure.
yeah, and he was kind of that was kind of a combined effort of just, the concept from Sony being very solid and our implementation, being good, and it just became a thing, and I got to work with I got to do a lot of weapons code for Twisted Metal, and um, some of the designs were kind of like very floaty. They didn't really have a very solid idea, and so we kind of played around, experimented with it, and kind of worked with the designers, Mike Yum and Dave Jaffe there, and kind of worked with them and to come up with some concepts, and they gave us a lot of freedom there too. They're just kind of, all right, well, this is what we wrote down and this is kind of what we're going for. But when we had ideas, they were usually pretty open to them, and would say, hey, if this works for you, and then they come through it, they say, hey, this is fantastic, but I'd like this to be do a little more like this, or can you make it more like this? And they're really looking for the cinematic and arcadey experience. And of course, I came from it from more of a simulation gaming. Well, all of us did, kind of, but I came from more of a the serious simulation of Car Wars aspect, and they were like, no, 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 this needs to move this way, this needs to this is way over the top, black humor. I'm sure Daddy Warpig would have loved it if he played it. With a sick sense of humor. And we just had a ball with it, but it was also very long hours. I mean, I remember being in the office at I was kind of come back from the restroom, and the entire office is full, everyone's busy, and I look at the clock and it says 12 o'clock, and I realize it's 12 o'clock midnight, not noon, and we're just going like crazy, just trying to get this out because we had like 10 months to make both games.
Those days were infamous. Well, bless you for persevering and coming out with some cool stuff. And how's it compare? As a writer, you can choose to work those hours if you like. Just right. How do you like it now?
Oh, well, as part of it, I did the indie gaming thing, where I still work, full time as a software developer, and so I spend a long day, 10 hours of coding, and coming home and then going back to coding was getting a little bit rough, and I noticed
Ooh,
myself really slowing down on that.
there's a reason why I don't do any coding projects in my spare time.
I did for a while, and I still like it. I still do it kind of as a hobby, especially since I'm a big fan of virtual reality, and so I play around with little demos. Experiment with things that I don't really get to experiment with at work. Um, but that was kind of part of it. It was like I need to do something different, and I really for a while doing the games was really my creative outlet. And what happened was I worked on a little indie role playing game called Frayed Knights: The Skull of Smackdown. And anyway, when a couple of the reviews were talking about the story and how they really enjoyed the story, because I made it was very tongue in cheek, as you would probably tell from the title. Um, and it was tongue in cheek, and it was kind of like the characters were talking to each other, kind of like players around a table would talk to each other, and have it get into arguments about the 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 beautiful woman who's imprisoned in the cell in this dungeon, and immediately they're all like, yeah, it's a trap, it's a trap. And the one guy who's kind of the newbie is like, what, we're not going to rescue her? And and you can make your choice of what you want to do. And and so that was a lot of fun. And I got a couple reviews that were saying, oh yeah, Jay is, or the story is pretty good. And I was feeling like, well, the story could have been better. And I was like, as a story, I know what I'd like to do. And I thought, well, maybe for the next game, maybe before I really get settled into the new next game, um, I should learn to write better. I should learn to really just. So what I'll do is I will write some short stories, and I will submit. I don't even know if there's places I could submit fantasy stories to anymore, but I'm going to write some stories, and I'm going to submit them, and I'm gonna see if I can get one published. And I figured if I got one published, that would be like this validation that, a blessing from whatever. Yes, you're good enough. Your story can be published in our, magazine or our anthology. And so I tried doing that. and I did get published, and it was a kind of a nice, it was a great validation, and I was like, wow, that's cool. And I figured originally I thought I'd just get it out of my system, and I kind of got addicted.
Oh
And
boy.
the next thing I know, I'm like, this is really cool. And then before I knew it, I was writing lots of short stories, several short stories a year, and submitting them constantly, and getting them rejected, and then turning them around, and sending them off to another market, and really getting into it, and writing just all kinds of stuff, with the idea that I should do a novel at some point. And there's always this feeling as a writer. It's like, when I get published, I will be a real writer. Well, when I get paid something more significant, I will be a real writer. Well, when I have 10 stories out that I've been paid for, that's when I'm a real writer. When I have a novel out, I'll be a real writer. When I have a series complete, then I will be a real writer. Well, when I get 10 books out, I'm just on just about I'm there now. Then I'll be so there's always going for the bigger goal, and this constant search for validation. One day I will be a real writer. But it is a lot of fun. I mean, as Dean Wesley Smith says, you sit in a room and you make shit up, and it's fantastic. It's great.
That's awesome. I'm glad you love it, and I'm glad that you do that stuff. We are over time, our usually time, so I think we'll talk about RPGs and stuff another day, perhaps.
Sounds great.
But before we go, I want to give Daddy Warpig one more chance for questions.
I need to make sure I'm okay. There I am. Okay.
Hello.
I was on mute for a while because,
we know.
I was blowing my nose. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm blowing my nose, and I put it on mute for the benefit of our audience. And I just needed to make sure I was off mute, and also that I had stopped blowing my nose. But both of those things are fun.
This is why your audience loves you, DW, because you take care of them and make sure that they don't hear you blowing your nose.
Yeah, among other things. It's not the only. It did not come out the way I thought that would in my head. I meant to say other things like watching terrible shows that no sane person would ever want to watch. And I have seen shows that would break the sanity of lesser men. I have seen shows that had almost broken my sanity. But anyway, so quick recap of the show. Last Breath, not The Last Breath. The Last Breath came out last year, completely different movie. Just Last Breath, Woody Harrelson. Good movie, go see it. Blood Drive. If you like that sort of sense of humor, watch it. It's 13 episodes. It is somehow difficult to find right now. And I'm not saying you should do what some people do to find difficult to find things, but if you can't find it through normal venues, you might have to. I'm just saying. I'm not encouraging you to do that, but you might have to. And Twisted Metal, I played it a couple times. Fun game. If you want to figure out how to track that down and play it, I'm sure there's some kind of PS1 emulator for the for a PC. Is it there?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and
if you own the original machine and you can rip the ROMs yourself and it's perfectly legal, go ahead and do that. I would not encourage you to download an emulator and download a copy of the disc because that would be illegal. And we would never encourage that on this show. But just be aware there might be other sites out there that would encourage you and give you directions on how to do that. And I would never tell you to do that because we are good and moral and decent people. Twisted Metal, great show. Or great, terrible show. Oh, terrible show. I watched that show. The second season is coming out, I think, in April. Terrible show. Don't watch that show. Good game. And of course, Jay's book came out on February 21st. So, Dead to Rights. Have I got that wrong? I've got that wrong, I think.
Well, it's Dead to Rights.
Dead to Rights. Okay.
Nailed it.
Got it in one.
Check it out. I already bought my copy. I haven't read it yet, but I bought my copy. So go ahead, check that out. Buy it on ebook, buy it in physical book, read some Car Wars. And did I miss anything? That's the whole show, right?
That was the whole show.
That's the whole dang entire show.
The whole show.
All right, folks. This has been Geek Gab for Monday, March 3rd, 2025. I want to thank everybody who tuned in and listened live. And I want to thank everybody who will tune in and listen later. We are available on youtube.com/geekgab. Once again, that's youtube.com/geekgab. We're also available on soundcloud.com, on the Google Play Store, and on the Apple iTunes Store. Just do a search for Geek Gab. Subscribe to us on the device of your choice. Listen to us on the web or download it. Download our show to your computer so you can keep a permanent record. We are signing out for today, folks, but don't you worry, don't you fret. We will be back.